Hello everyone, my name is Barry O'Dowd, and as a member of the RDS Committee of Enterprise and its Council, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the latest discussion in the RDS Disruptor series. Brought to you in association with IDA Ireland, this series showcases some of the world's fastest growing companies, many of whom have tentacles in the sustainability space and are on the path to becoming some of the next generation of industry leaders. This series continues the historic work of the RDS and its commitment to sharing the latest ideas to shape the economic and cultural development of Ireland. Please subscribe to the RDS YouTube channel to see the latest videos as soon as they are posted. I would now like to hand you over to your series host, Aimee Williams, IDA Ireland.
Thank you, Barry. I'm very pleased to welcome today's guest, Enda Keane, the co-founder and CEO of Irish forest tech company Treemetrics Limited. And yes, you heard me correct, forest technology, certainly a new sector for me to delve into. So Treemetrics is an Irish company that is leading the way in disrupting and innovating forest management through the use of digital measurement technologies, verification tools, and data analytics. And more recently, they have expanded their offering to develop solutions to tackle the global carbon challenge. Enda and his team are pioneers in this space, and their technology is used by some of the largest forest companies in the world, as well as the European Space Agency. It's probably worth noting that the global forest and logging market is worth an estimated $560 billion, and Treemetrics technology has been called out as revolutionizing this industry. With 25 years of experience working across the technology and forest industries, Enda has worked in both the state and private forest sectors, and for the last 17 years, he has built Treemetrics into a globally respected forestry software product and consulting business, with customers in over 35 countries around the globe. So I'm really looking forward to learning more about this industry, but also Enda's leadership insights around scaling the business. Enda, you are very welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Aimee. Thanks very much. Great to appreciate the opportunity.
Enda, you fit squarely within this definition of a global disruptor. As I said there, Treemetrics are revolutionizing traditional measurement methods for the forest industry, many of which I believe have been in place for over 100 years. And then you've shifted the industry from having a lot of boots on the ground to deploying satellite sensors, to not just measure, but verify the data, and then adding in that capability around digital analytics technology, and made it all a lot more accessible in real time. So I think the first question really is then, how did this all come about? And maybe perhaps follow on with a bit more about the company and exactly what it is you do.
So it all began with the simple problem of measuring a tree. As a young forester, you're sent off to college and you're brainwashed into how to measure a forest, basically. And the old way of using a 19th century tool was with a measuring tape. And you go out into the forest, like the scene behind me here. You go out to a forest and you collect data, measuring the diameter of the trees, and you walk through the forest collecting that data. And after you follow that recipe, you look up some books and models, and you make a calculation. And then when it goes to the real world of actually selling those trees or cutting those trees, unfortunately, it wasn't working out for me and for many other people in the industry. So I started to look around and look for better solutions, basically, to how this could be done. And just by pure luck, I was sent a 3D image from a 3D camera of a building, the Smithsonian Institute actually, and outside the Smithsonian Institute was a tree, a digital tree in 3D scan. And that blew me away when I realized what that data was and what it could be. And the scene that you're seeing here behind me is a 3D scan of a forest in Blarney Castle in County Cork. And it was the first forest we ever scanned. And we took out this 3D camera and we started collecting that data, and we said, hey, we could actually revolutionize the way trees are measured and how we quantify the contents of a forest. So that's how it all began. It began by a bit of luck, a bit of serendipity regarding an image that was sent to me because of the work I was doing in my previous life.
So it sounds like it was that true entrepreneurial light bulb moment. But it's almost moving, it's that convergence now. You've got trees and tech. Tech is enabling, I suppose, a lot of this being able to develop the products and services. And when you look at the product offerings, you might talk us through about what as I understand, you have the 3 products today. You're launching 2 more products. Maybe talk us through what they are and how they work.
Yeah, so like many entrepreneurs, you dive in to solve a particular problem, and then when you're in the actual problem, you realize, bloody hell, there's more problems as well that you have to deal with. And as the name suggests, we began with this 3 measurement solution. And to work out what was really happening out there with our predictions, we wanted to test ourselves against the actual cutting of the trees, the harvesting of the trees. And when we went out there, we observed the people cutting the trees after we measured it, and we unearthed a huge can of worms, basically, of some of the rogue practices that were going on out in the real world, in an industry that didn't really want precision, unfortunately. And I give you an example of what was happening in the real world, where the forest being cut, the person on the machine, we observed them deliberately taking the tree and converting the forest into lower value logs to supply a different market. So essentially the forest owner was losing money, and all it was a little flick on the switch on the harvesting machine to turn a high value saw log into a lower value pallet log, costing the forest owner a lot of money. And unbeknownst to us, we realized that we had unearthed this big can of worms. So our company had to evolve and move with the problems that we were unearthing. So we had to develop this solution called Harvest. So we had measure, manage, and harvest. And the harvest piece was where we started to collect the data from the cutting machines and feed that back in as to what we were actually predicting. And then again, talking to our customers, we learned from them that they needed better methods for management. So we developed a solution called Manage, which is where we help the forest owner to manage their forest by just taking in the satellite imagery, the drone imagery, the various measurements that we were helping them to collect, the data coming from the machines, and now other sensors, through Internet of Things, basically, and help them to manage that data. So to summarize, what Treemetrics really is think of Google Earth. It's a mapping system like Google Earth, but in that system we have a database for storing all your forestry data, your tree measurements, your tree growth data, your harvesting data, and other sensors.
So in that, you're talking about satellites, sensors, drones. How does that connectivity work with the satellite? I mean, is it you guys connecting to it, or how do you get access to that? Is that something that any company can get access to, or is it through partnerships?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the satellites are generally owned by big corporations, and a good example is the European Space Agency, which have been a great help to us. So they own the satellites, they launch the satellites, and that data is essentially a picture of the Earth that is captured by the satellite and downloaded and stored in a central system, like what the European Space Agency have. And thankfully, that data is made available to the public. And actually, it's free data, which is not many people realize that the European Space Agency have huge amounts of continuous imagery of the Earth. Every 5 days, a satellite passes over the Earth. And today in Cork is a lovely blue sky, so it's a good day for satellites. You can see through the clouds. But they actually have satellites as well that will penetrate the cloud, radar systems that will penetrate the cloud and take measurements of the Earth. So it's in my journey through Treemetrics, it's amazing the evolution, my journey through the forestry world. I'm nearly 30 years now working in the industry. It's amazing the evolution of those satellites, how much they've improved. Like my first ever job actually was with UCD. It was a summer job as soon as I graduated, and I was sent out to County Roscommon with the first satellite images that we had for Ireland. It was a satellite called Spot. And every little pixel was 20 by 20 meters on the ground. And if you just think about that, when you go onto Google Earth, you can zoom in Cork City or Dublin City, and you can look at your house. You can make out the car that's in your driveway. And that satellite is now 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters on the ground. So it's incredible over the 30 years, the improvement in the imagery. And because of that improvement, it means that it's changed the way we manage and monitor our forests and look after them.
Yeah. And you were saying there, a lot of the forest owners were, maybe being hard done by. Is it typically forest owners that are your customers that are kind of looking to buy this mapping, looking to have access to the data? Or is it other types of customers?
Yeah. It's mainly the forest owner that we help. So in the world of forestry, the forest owner is generally a price taker. Like with many primary producers, the forest owner is at the mercy of the secondary producer. So the sawmiller or the buyer generally is the price maker, and the taker has to live with whatever price is put before them. And along came Treemetrics, which was now trying to empower the owner to help them to better understand the extent of their forest using the satellite image. And then with the image behind me here, you can see that we're now able to quantify the logs and the value before you cut the forest. And this was a fairly revolutionary, disruptive technology, disrupting a lot of middlemen, disrupting the buyers. And yeah, it has been a difficult journey. We underestimated the power of that price maker and the middlemen in the industry globally. So thankfully, we've managed to capture the attention and survive over those years and grow with the help we've been given to the forest owner, helping them to know their value before they fell their forest, helping them to know their value. Thankfully now there's a whole new world around carbon. So it's not just about harvest, it's about helping them to understand the growth of their forest and the carbon that's been sequestered in their forest. So it's a whole new world. It's been a journey of evolution, as we mentioned earlier, and a journey of survival and disruption along that way.
And has that revenue model then evolved in time as well? I mean, how do you monetize the different aspects of your business?
Yeah, it has. We began as a service company. So over the 17 years, we worked in over 35 countries around the world. And in the early days, it was actually boots on the ground out there measuring and scanning forests and measuring and valuing the forests. And then over the last few years, as our software started to evolve, we started charging a typical license fee. And then over the last few years, it's further evolved into the SaaS model, where we now charge on a price per hectare. It's a very common way we charge our customer, or a charge per user. It's another method that we use. But yeah, SaaS is new to us, this software as a service model, which is great in some ways because it means you've recurring revenue and it's small amounts of money, you pay as you go. The challenge with SaaS, though, is that it's quite difficult. You have to get it rolling and getting moving, and you have to be very patient and stick with it. But everybody knows the whole world is going to SaaS. You know, when you're paying for your phone or paying for your Microsoft software license, it's all little prices per month or per year now is the way it's going, and that's the way we've gone and evolved.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was a business decision, but it was the way the world was going too. And I guess there's probably a lot of other Irish kind of startup companies out there that maybe have that model of being in that services space and kind of wondering, well, how do we, move with the times, move with digital, and get to a place of having a SaaS platform? Is there any kind of insights or learnings you would share with them on that front?
Yeah, it's a great model, and we were very lucky. In Ireland, we've got some great SaaS companies, and one thing I would say is reach out to the successful SaaS companies that are there. And that's one great thing about Irish tech, is that we have very supportive founders and members of companies out there that will help you. So I actually reached out to a few companies. One company here in Cork, which is called Teamwork, which you may have heard of. Yeah. Which is blazing a trail in the world of project management. And I reached out to one of the founders, Peter Coppinger, and he was very helpful, very supportive, gave me some real, clear learnings that they had learned from the world of SaaS. And SaaS is great, but you have to be patient and you have to build it up. You have to get your pricing. It takes a lot of experimentation. It's a lot of digital marketing. It's not simple, but once you get it moving and you get your system set up for it, all the little pieces, the Stripe charges, etc., it's hard in the setup and you have to be patient. But once you get it going, it's exciting, because you do wake up and you see new licenses being sold as you were asleep at night. You see a person out in Australia or some other part of the world downloading your software and paying you for it. So that's exciting, that piece of it.
Yeah, and we might come back to that as we look to the future and how you might think about scaling that. But you've kind of touched on a little bit there of the ecosystem, I suppose, we have in Ireland, reaching out to other, fantastically successful startups such as Teamwork. But if we kind of go back to the beginning and getting started, Treemetrics is, if I understand correctly, predominantly self-funded, but you have worked with the Irish government state body Enterprise Ireland. How has that, how important has that been, and a supportive network for Treemetrics on your journey?
Yeah, so Treemetrics, a lot of people struggle to understand because we're a country of mainly of cows and sheep and grass and some tech companies as well. But forestry, we didn't have a huge culture in forestry and knowledge of forestry. So we struggled at the start to try and explain the business opportunity and the growth potential of our company. But thankfully, Enterprise Ireland took us under their wing. And also we leveraged other state support such as Science Foundation Ireland. We leveraged that network, the European Horizon 2020 network of research and development. So everywhere we could try and get some of the supports, we got them. And actually it was the European Space Agency as well, which the initial introduction came from Enterprise Ireland. So we were very lucky to get connected with the Space Agency almost 10 years ago to the day. That was a great breakthrough for us because there was a real fit there. If you think about it, the Space Agency had these fantastic satellites for taking images of the world, GPS for showing us where we were in the world, and satellite communications to communicate, because the forest world has very poor network coverage. So the three pillars of space that I just mentioned have become a very, very important part of our solution. And it was, the final point I'll make is that in our journey and our history, we were very lucky. We came across IBM on our journey, and they have been a huge help to us, Aimee, in that journey. And it encouraged us to reach out to other multinationals. So as you know, in Ireland, we've got all these great multinationals, and Treemetrics, what we've done, and if it's tipped to other maybe founders who are thinking of how to expand and grow and learn, I'd encourage them to knock on the door and walk in the door of some of those multinationals, because when I think back in my time, IBM were a massive help to us, and some of the other multinationals, Intel, Microsoft, they've all helped us in some way.
So it sounds like, lots of value through the Enterprise Ireland network in terms of opening a lot of doors. Fantastic to have that introduction to the European Space Agency. You've spoken previously about multinationals, their presence in Ireland, and at times maybe have played a bit of a role in the growth of the company. You might talk to us about some of those relationships you developed and how they've come about.
Yeah, so the story behind the multinationals is a funny one. I was driving home one night, late at night from Dublin, and I was listening to an interview on Radio 1 about IBM and the work they were doing in Galway, in the Galway Bay region with a project called Smart Bay. And I was listening to the guy talking about it, and he was talking about the way they were revolutionizing the marine industry. And I said, hey, that's what we want to do in the forest industry. And I picked up the phone to the guy who was on the call, a guy called Robert McCarthy in IBM. And I spoke to him, and within a week I was up in IBM in Mulhuddard in their innovation center. And that kicked off a great relationship with IBM, where we learned a huge amount from them. That was nearly 10 years ago, and that's where I first heard about the cloud and the Internet of Things. And they had a great vision called the Three Eyes, that the world was going to become instrumented, interconnected, and intelligent, and instrumented through sensors, interconnected through the web, and intelligent through analytics. And if you think about that 10 years ago, that's what's actually after happening. You think of the Internet of Things, and they helped us in 10 years ago to reimagine the forestry platform that we've built. So Forest HQ, as it's called now, is as a result of that initial engagement with IBM and that assistance that they gave us to reimagine how we were going to serve our customers and serve our data. And we were very lucky, and that encouraged us to go out to other multinationals in Ireland. So we got talking to people like Intel over the years, Dell, Microsoft. Any advice I give to someone starting from day zero with a software technology company is don't be afraid to reach out to the multinationals and talk to them and get in the door to their innovation lab and start engaging with them. It'll benefit you greatly.
Yeah, no, it's really great advice. And the other element you had touched on earlier was Science Foundation Ireland. So you've kind of got the Irish startup ecosystem, the multinationals, and then you have Science Foundation Ireland, who are supporting different elements of research work and the Horizon 2020 programme with the EU. What kind of projects have you been involved in, and how do you actually go about getting involved with them in the first place?
Yeah, so I touched on it earlier about the lack of resources. When you're a young forestry company in Ireland, you have to be innovative and you have to be smart on how you attain resources and R&D resources in particular. So we tapped into that network through the universities here in Ireland, through the Horizon 2020 program, as I mentioned earlier, and that naturally evolved into Science Foundation Ireland. So a great example of a SFI funded project is a project we're currently involved with the University of Maynooth, with Microsoft and Science Foundation Ireland, University College Dublin, University of Limerick, and it's a project called Terrain AI, and that's giving us access to leading sensors. So we've got these access to amazing drones with lasers from above. Lasers now, the pictures you're seeing behind me was from an big old heavy laser scanner nearly 10, 12 years ago that was on a tripod. Now you can actually walk through the forest with a laser scanner. And the SFI project that we're on there is giving us access to that hardware, giving us access to the expertise to try and process that data. So from a processing point of view, the world has been revolutionized around artificial intelligence and machine learning. And that's what the SFI work is giving us access to those experts who can help us to reimagine and re-engineer our solutions. Because with the reality of technology, to stay ahead, to stay current, you have to keep looking out there as to what's coming by way of sensors and technology, and that means you have to keep evolving. And we've leveraged that great network that is in Ireland with SFI type funding, European funding, Irish funding. We've recently been successful in what's called a DTIF, which I presume you've heard of. It's the Disruptive Technology Innovation Fund, which is again going to give us access to multinational collaboration and university collaboration in the area of remote sensing. So we're seriously excited about that. It's going to open up major doors into the world of AI, working with Dell, working with UCD in that whole space.
Yeah, and we've spoken before about you're a team of 11 people, growing startup company. A lot of other companies and leaders out there might think, God, you're working with SFI, you're working with different funds. Like, how do you do it? Like, how do you manage your resources to get involved in so many different programs and projects? Because I suspect some people could, think it's too much to try to tackle.
Yeah, well, I suppose the first thing is we had a very clear vision. So going in the door to the multinationals, we were very clear on what we wanted, what supports we needed, what help we needed. And then from a resources point of view, our company, we're mainly some foresters and software engineers. So we're very clear about our capabilities and our resources. So we knew what we wanted. We needed help from a machine learning point of view. We needed help. We're always going to need more help from artificial intelligence, machine learning, sensors, technology. So yeah, it's about being clear on what you want, and also being good at listening and what they believe is going to be the future. So yeah, we're over the daunting piece. It's actually surprisingly easy to get in there and talk to these people, and if you've got a good vision and they buy into it and they see the potential of it, and that you're a good partner, good to listen and good to work with, it will help you.
Yeah, I think that's really some solid advice. And to leverage what is actually existing in Ireland across the ecosystem and group of stakeholders. You touched on kind of a lot of the technology, the sensors, capturing all these images. That's a lot of data, I suspect. I did read that Treemetrics has the largest forestry analytics database in the world. Like how many, if you can share it, like how many trees would you have indexed on the platform?
I'd say we've nearly lost count. We had over 10 million a few years ago.
10 billion or million?
10 million.
Million.
But the reason why we have so many trees, if you think about it, from day one right up to 17 years later, the trees that you see in the background again, I refer to them to try to prove yourself and to gain trust within the industry. The foresters are a very skeptical bunch, like farmers. They need proof. So we spent many, many years going out actually collecting laser data or measurement data and verification data, where you actually go and actually climb the trees, knock them. That forest you see behind there again, we actually hired a height for hire that we drove into the forest, and we went up with the height for heart to measure the trees, to verify. And that's how you...
verifying that the technology had picked it up correctly in the first place. So you're having to go back to prove the science behind the technology is working.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all about the proof and this, you know, and the output of that then is scientific papers. So over the years, to gain trust, we have published papers now with our partners, with universities around the world. So we published a paper, for example, with Oregon State University. We worked together with them in Oregon, and we published a paper in the US Journal of Forestry. With partners, we've published papers in the Canadian Journal of Forestry, the European Journal of Forestry. And they were very, very important collaborations and research, collecting lots of real proof points. The harvesting machines that you'd see on these Discovery Channel TV channels and Netflix and so forth of living inside in the forestry world, those machines collect awesome data. And that was a very, very important piece of the data that we started to collect over the years. And that then allows you to perfect and improve. That's the learning that you have to have. So when I look back on it now, yeah, it is amazing how many trees we've measured and how many collection points we've had. But it was all part of the imperative of proving and getting trust out there. As I said to you, we're disrupting a rough and tough industry, and there was lots of rumors spread around about us that we weren't quite accurate in our predictions. And the only way to defend yourself is to go out there and prove it with scientific, third-party, independent checks and balances. So every country we went to for the first few years, we were being tested and trials were. It always started with a pilot. There was a joke in our company that we had more pilots than Ryanair. That's what you had to do. That's what you had to do to prove yourself.
Yeah, because that was one thing I was going to ask you about was kind of. You know, gathering the data makes you a big, serious kind of, I suppose, game changer in this industry. There, must have been those who didn't welcome it, and that presumably then was one of those challenges that you had to overcome. Was overcoming those, not maybe just the skeptical farmers, but those who were maybe not, who were not so willing to see the data because it was harmful for what they were trying to do. So,
yeah, exactly. We had to be up early, and we had to close the loop. So that getting that data from the harvesting machine was a really, really important move for us, and getting access to the data was very important, and closing the loop and comparing what you predicted versus the actual turned out to be a lot more difficult than we realized. And I suppose if I can give any advice to any upcoming or entrepreneur who's thinking of getting going, and disruption is the title of one of the titles to this video. Disruption, you have to be very, very careful. You have to be very, very switched on as to who you're disrupting. And when in hindsight, we were very naive as to the backlash and to the strength of the people we were trying to disrupt. And the only thing I can say to you is that you have to have serious resolve. And one of my mentors uses the word persistence. The only way to be persistent, persistence beats resistance is his phrase. Basically, you have to be there for the long haul, and be persistent.
I kind of wanted to touch back on actually the customer piece of it, and again, I think a lot of the times, Irish companies really punch above their weight. How do you go about building that global customer base? Because, it's not just, you're not just doing this for Irish forestries, you're doing this for some of the largest in the world. And I think that understanding and learnings around building those relationships, winning new customers and who they are, if there's kind of some story or journey you can take us through on that, that would be great.
Yeah, I suppose one thing that we were very lucky with a good name. Treemetrics is a good name, and it kind of resonated with people, and it is what we are, what it says, So the news traveled fairly quickly through the forestry world that this is what we were trying to do. So we've been very, very lucky that we've had a lot of support globally, and as I said to you, we've been in 35 countries around the world. And one thing I realized in hindsight is that being Irish was an advantage. If you think about it, the Canadians and the Russians and the Finns, they want to see themselves as the leaders in forestry tech. And when they hear this small little company from Ireland, we're not really a threat to any of them. they're globally competing for the supply of timber and export of timber. And when they hear of a bunch of Irish lads going out with their technology, they're more welcoming, we feel. And certainly being Irish has been a huge advantage to us as well. In the countries we've gone to, we're very welcomed. We're respected as a country, I think, in hindsight. And yeah, we generally when we arrive to these countries, we're welcomed and we're looked after well. I must say that as well. Over the years, we've made a lot of friendships. And people have been very, very, very helpful down outside of Ireland, I should say. It's been a lot easier, funny enough, to get traction globally than in our own country. It's hard to explain, but that's been the experience we've had.
And as you move forward now, you're moving into this new world around forest certifications and carbon certifications. This presumably opens a whole new avenue for growth, but also a new customer base. I don't know if you want to kind of talk us through what has developed there and what you are bringing to market. Yeah,
so one thing about COVID, we didn't mention COVID at all so far, but one thing about COVID that we noticed back in mid-2020, we noticed that definitely there was a huge amount of conversation around carbon, and forestry started to emerge as having a very important role. Even though we've been talking about it for many, many years, since the climate talks in Paris, it was decided that forestry was going to be one of the pillars of the solution for combating climate change. But certainly things kicked off in 2020, and we noticed that companies like Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, everybody was committing to net zero, and tree planting and forest restoration, forest rehabilitation were a part of that solution. And thankfully now some major corporates globally have started to put their money where their mouth is and start to invest in carbon credits in these abatement programs. And we've watched as our competitors have announced major fundraisings that this whole industry is kicking off, and thankfully Treemetrics now we've followed that megatrend and call it a megatrend. And over the last year and a half, we've been working with the Space Agency to develop a more streamlined method of forest certification, and coupled to that, we're working on a more streamlined method of forest carbon verification and certification. So yeah, it goes back to our relationship again with the Space Agency. If you go into Woody's DIY or your B&Qs or your IKEAs and you buy a piece of wood, bit of furniture, whatever it is, it generally has to come from it has to have a stamp, a certified stamp that it came from a sustainably managed forest. And that process is a very rigorous paper trail with independent third-party checks, the same as the carbon markets are. And Treemetrics, we spotted an opportunity to help streamline that entire process. Our customers had been telling us how difficult it was and how awkward it was, and a stressful period of getting your certificates in place. And what we've done over the last year and a half, working with the Space Agency, we've been developing a more streamlined process. One where we're leveraging the power of the satellites to make it easier and more streamlined in the auditing of your forest, to prove that you are doing things properly, to be more transparent and to build more trust. So yeah, we're really excited. We're launching the forest certification module in the coming weeks. We've been working with the PEFC Global certificate body, and also other leading players such as Soil Association and a major forestry company called Till Hill in Scotland. And they've helped us to shape this tool, which we're calling SAFRCert. And following on that, we're also working in the carbon verification / certification space. And yeah, we're really excited about that work. It's a whole new world. That, as I said, there's a revolution happening around forest carbon. And it's all around trust again, and proving that the trees are there, that they're growing at the rate that they are supposed to be, and that the carbon credits are of high quality.
And I suppose that's the value, any of these multinationals who, are investing in their sustainability agendas. It's an increasingly strong topic on boards, it's in company strategy. Being able to know that they're, if they're looking to offset, I heard the other day that they're not even using the word offset anymore. They talk about carbon procurement is kind of the new language, that how do they procure kind of, I guess in this case, it's trees or get those credits, that they need to ensure that they are certified, that they are verified, and that it's not just kind of waving the flag of, oh, we bought some trees in some part of the world somewhere. So do you interact with those companies on that, or is it still all through the forestry owners?
Yeah, no, it's well, we're helping both. So like the great thing about carbon, the exciting thing about carbon is measurement now matters, right? So historically measurement should have mattered, but it really matters now. And I'll give an example. So we're working on a project with Self-Help Africa in Africa, and we're helping the landowners that have made their land available for tree planting, and we're also helping the people who've acquired or procured the carbon, to use your word, and we're in the middle essentially measuring to prove that the trees are there, sensing from above with satellites to prove that they're healthy and that they're growing, and we're out there verifying basically. I should say that the people on the ground are collecting the data with our app, with our systems on the ground, and that data is getting pushed onto the cloud, and we're doing the calculations using the satellites then to do verification. So yeah, we're really excited about that work. It's a whole new dimension for us where the buyer is working with the landowner together, and they're in unison and they're working together. And it's all about quality information. It's all about data integrity and proof. And we're working on a similar project that's exciting in Canada. Again, working with an indigenous tribe there, and they've got millions of hectares of wildfire damage basically that are being planned for rehabilitation, for replanting, and we're helping those people to put the proper process in place to get their projects registered, and in time get them verified and measured.
That's really fantastic. It's, I don't know, can you call yourselves kind of at some point the eBay for trees? This kind of this platform that's facilitating this, or eBay for carbon? I don't know.
Yeah, eBay for carbon is a good description of it. And we coined this phrase, the Internet of Trees, or IO Trees, is a good kind of description of it. So if you think about it, to prove that carbon is properly being sequestered and captured, it's going to need a combination of sensors connected to the web. So measurements being collected, satellites from above being collected, and this continuous recalculation of that growth, and allowing third-party independent auditors to go out on the ground and actually physically measure those trees themselves to prove again that trust, to build that trust that the data has been captured. And then the final piece of it is the trading of that actual commodity, that new commodity, which is carbon. And that's where we see ourselves making some money, is getting a share of that trade in that commodity. So we're getting paid to measure, to support our customers to measure, to calculate, and to trade.
Again, I just want to go back and make the point that you're doing all this with just less than a dozen people in Cork, but it's that it seems like you've that just razor kind of sharp focus on the technology, leveraging it to the best of its ability, finding the right partners, and applying the knowledge. Just looking kind of, I suppose, ahead to the future and kind of what's next. I did read an article that said the global forestry software market is set to grow by 1.02 billion over the next kind of 4 years. So it's kind of an undeniable huge growth opportunity. Beyond, I suppose, that carbon piece, how do you see the opportunity for Treemetrics to capitalize on that growth in this industry? Yeah,
to become part of that marketplace, we're going to work more and more with partners. Yeah. So a great example is that partnership with Self-Help Africa. So they're, if you don't know much about that organization, they're an amazing organization that we were only recently introduced to, but they have, decades of experience of working down there in Africa and in other developing parts of the world, helping the landowners, helping the people to come out of poverty. So we're going to work with groups like that who will help with the supply of the projects, work with them as well to work with the corporates who want to procure that carbon. So the way we see it evolving, our route to market is it's all about partnerships. And if I look back in hindsight and be a little critical of our strategy in the past, is that Treemetrics, even though we were great at partnering with multinationals from a technology development point of view, we certainly should have partnered more with people in the go-to-market phase. So Treemetrics over the coming months will be announcing some more partnerships with major corporates on helping them to procure carbon and on the supply side, aid agencies like Self-Help Africa to link up with the supply. So it's a supply and demand problem. There's going to be, the way we're reading it and from what we're studying out there, there's going to be a huge amount of capital. In some predictions of up to 50 billion a year is going to be deployed into carbon offsetting projects. And there's going to be a supply problem. So you're going to have quality carbon projects generated where the landowners are being properly and fairly being treated. And I suppose the bottom line here is that if we get this all right, and what really excites me and my colleagues and my partners is that if we get this model right, we can deploy huge amounts of capital to the developing world and make sure that the majority of that money is going towards the tree planting, and that the majority of that income that's earned in the future is going to the communities and the people and impacting the livelihoods of those people on the ground. And that is a seriously exciting mission and an important Treemetrics that we're going all in on, to be honest with you.
Because it's for sure, because it's not just kind of, oh, you're going and planting trees and giving a living to people planting trees. It's that they can learn to live off and make a living off the produce of trees, or what it can generate, I guess, from the soil, that they can do more farming or growth from, if I've understood it correctly.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if the way this is going to work out is that in the long term, those landowners will get paid, recurring revenue every year for their carbon as their forests sequester more and more carbon. And they're going to, in time, generate income from the wood that's going to come from those forests. And the agro, it's not all about trees. There's agroforestry projects as well. There's rangeland projects. But yeah, there's going to be a range of income to come from it. And that's what happened, actually. If you look at Ireland over the last 30 years, the Exchequer invested, the taxpayers of Ireland invested in over 3 billion euros of money into supporting farmers to plant their land. And the farmer got paid a yearly income. And then they have the forest to harvest in time. And I think that model has worked really successfully in Ireland, and similar things can be done in the developing world, where these huge amounts of capital to solve this. And guess what? We're solving the carbon problem that's in our atmosphere as well while we're doing this all. So it's a serious win-win-win. The triple bottom line is, they say, where you're benefiting communities, you're benefiting the climate, you're benefiting the local economy. It really is a win-win-win.
It's that impact. It's doing something with meaning, and it's impactful as well. It's really fantastic. And as you I suppose, the next couple of years for Treemetrics, and as you maybe look to scale the company, and you've touched on the need around some machine learning, AI type skills. Is that where you see more the kind of skills that you're going to need for the future, and how that kind of, I suppose, what kind of skills are going to help support the growth of Treemetrics going forward?
Yeah, definitely. That machine learning AI space is going to be hugely important. We've already done an amount of work in that space, but from what we see that's coming down the tracks by way of sensors, like have drones that will fly through the forest and collect amazing data for you, fly above the forest. Satellites are getting better and better. Yeah, so we'll be investing for sure in our capabilities on the back of the funding that we've secured with the help of the Irish government. We'll be investing that in the data science. And then from a go-to-market point of view, as I said to you, we're going to be leveraging the Irish jersey. Like Ireland, we're all proud of the huge work that has gone on with our aid agencies across the world over many decades. And we're going to be leveraging that aid and that relationship that Ireland has on the ground in these developing countries. And working with those aid agencies to direct that capital to the right place. So that's going to be about, we're going to have to get better at our processes within our company, learning about the whole process of carbon verification and the auditing and the checks and balances have to go on. So it's going to be as much about process as anything else.
So actually, you touched on earlier about, you saw the project that was going on over in the marine industry and kind of thought that's what you want to do for forest kind of technology. But if you go the other way, the technology you've developed and the platforms and systems and tools you're using, do you see them having applications in other sectors that you could apply them to?
Yeah, we've started to receive calls from people in the farming world looking at what we've been doing, and we're openly talking to people in the farming world that we feel we can deploy or they can take our technology and use it in that world, because farm carbon is becoming a huge subject about how do you reduce the carbon footprint of farming. So that's a good example of where we feel we can leverage a lot of our know-how around mapping and data collection and data analytics, that we can help those people as well. So yeah, we will be definitely working and supporting other players in other parts of the world.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, I have so many other questions I could ask you about today. I think it's amazing how you've been able to kind of grow and pivot the company. And I think a lot more people will be interested in forest technology and keeping track of what you guys are doing, or even seeing if they can download an app and go out and start measuring the trees in their forest. Maybe just to wrap up, and switching a little off Treemetrics and back to you yourself, Enda, I have a couple of quick fire questions if I can ask you. Which kind of tech company, whether disruptive or not, do you admire most?
Well, I mentioned IBM. Obviously, I have a huge amount of gratitude to them, but I suppose when I look back in my life of working in tech, I suppose you have to really, I have huge admiration for Steve Jobs and everything he did in Apple, and Mr. Wozniacki, not just Steve Jobs, but the Apple story is incredible, how they reimagined so many things. And now with this latest iPhone with the 3D scanner, we're seriously excited about that. That when we're actually doing that now, you can actually go out with your iPhone 12 and your iPhone 13, and we're leveraging that tech to measure trees. So huge respect for many of the major tech visionaries, Bezos and Gates and all these people. But yeah, for me, Jobs was the man who seriously reimagined so many different things.
And they're only up the road from you down from Cork City there, so a partner nearby potentially. What then is the best leadership advice you have ever been given?
Wow, I've been given lots of advice, and that's one thing we in hindsight we were good. We went out, and one thing's for sure, that I mentioned it earlier, that the Irish tech scene, there's a serious goodwill out there to help and support people. So one thing I would say is, definitely don't be shy and go out and reach out to your fellow founders and leverage their mentorship and their help. They will help you. It's amazing. And I've met many great, successful entrepreneurs and many great bits of advice from them. It's very hard to pick one piece of advice, but for sure, you hear a lot of them say the same thing around, your team and everything else, which goes without saying now. But trusting your intuition is a very, very important point, that, you've got lots of people who are willing to give you advice for sure, but trusting your intuition, your gut at the end of the day, and making your own mind up. That's a seriously important point. And I go back to my little message I said earlier as well, that if you are disrupting, be prepared that it's a tough, sometimes lonely journey, and persistence for sure does beat resistance. Don't forget that one.
Yeah, no, I wrote that down earlier. And I think you just answered the other kind of question I had, which was around the advice you would give to scaling tech companies. And I think what I'm kind of taking a lot from today is, leverage the tech in the ecosystem, find the right partners, persist, back the science, but back yourself as well, seems to be what I've kind of heard from you today. I suppose, last question for you, in your opinion, I guess, what makes Ireland a great location for digital technology companies such as yourselves to be able to thrive and future scale?
Well, look, we mentioned it all along there. Like we touched on it with the agencies that are in Ireland. There's no doubt we were very blessed with some of the agencies, and the fact that the multinationals are here and they're open to talk to you. So yeah, we've serious supports, and then I do really believe that we're very blessed to be Irish. don't get me wrong. I think that has been a huge part of our success over the years, is the fact that so many people in so many countries are so welcoming to you. When you mention that you're Irish, you get a smile on their face, and they're happy to meet you. I don't know if we didn't conquer anybody or whatever it was, but we have a good reputation. Irish people have a good reputation. We're trustworthy people, and we're passionate about what we do, and we make friends as we go along. So I think we're blessed to be Irish. And
I'll tell you, I could certainly attest to that from traveling across the world in the role I do, and the people we meet, and certainly the door is always open, and as soon as you mention you're Irish, there's some connection, or someone trying to make a connection back to Ireland. I think you're right. It's very, very powerful. Well, look, Enda, it's been fascinating to talk to you today. And I think actually you kind of dispelled this myth that money doesn't grow on trees, because I think there is money to be made there. So on behalf of the RDS and IDA Ireland, thank you so much for joining us. I think we're all collectively impressed at the level of disruption, the scale of your success, and the opportunity your technology has to really make a lasting and meaningful impact on climate change. And I wish you and your team every success going forward. And then thank you to all those watching us today, and do check out the other Digital Disruptor conversations on the RDS YouTube channel. And as always, feel free to like and share this video to help expand the reach of today's conversation. Thank you, and see you next time.